Hello, and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast, the place where English learners from around the world come to find not just language tips, but real stories, support, and encouragement. I'm Nick.
And I'm Emily. Thank you so much for joining us today. This episode is a little different, and a little more personal. Because today, we're talking about something that's rarely discussed openly: learning English while living with depression or anxiety.
Yes, and if you're listening to this and feeling low, tired, anxious, or even numb, first of all, thank you. It takes so much strength just to press play when your mental health is struggling. We see you, we honor your effort, and we want to speak to that part of you that still wants to grow.
It's easy to think that you need to be okay before you can learn anything new, especially a language. But the truth is, many people are learning English while carrying invisible emotional weights. And today's conversation is about reminding you that you're not behind, you're human.
That's right. Let's start by saying something very clearly: your mental health matters more than your grammar. If learning English feels hard some days, that's not because you're lazy or not smart enough. It might be because your brain is simply trying to survive.
Exactly. And even though no podcast can replace therapy or medical support, we hope that this episode can feel like a warm hand on your shoulder. So today, we'll talk about how depression or anxiety can affect language learning, and more importantly, how you can still move forward slowly, gently, and with self-compassion.
Let's begin with this. Have you ever felt guilty for not studying? For not finishing a lesson, or for forgetting what you learned last week?
I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that. When you live with depression or anxiety, even small tasks can feel overwhelming. Getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, replying to a message, they all take energy. So when you don't study English, your mind might tell you you're failing. But the truth is, you're doing your best with what you have.
Yes. And your best might look different every day. Some days, your best might be listening to this podcast with your eyes closed under a blanket. And that still counts.
Absolutely. One helpful mindset is to shift from perfection to progress. Instead of asking, "How much did I study today?" try asking, "Did I give myself kindness while learning?" Because forcing yourself to study when you're burnt out or emotionally numb often leads to guilt and exhaustion, not growth.
And I know it's tempting to compare yourself to other learners. You see someone on social media reading advanced novels or speaking fluently, and you start to think, why am I not there yet? But remember, people post highlights, not their whole story. They may not be battling the same emotional storms as you are.
Yes, and here's something else that might surprise you: language learning doesn't have to be fast to be successful. Slow learning is still learning. If you learn one word a day while depressed, that's powerful. You're building a bridge between your current self and your future self, brick by brick.
Exactly. And sometimes, language can even be a tool for healing. When you're learning English, you're not just memorizing vocabulary, you're opening new pathways in your brain. You're distracting your anxious thoughts, expressing your pain in new words, even finding community through connection.
That's such a beautiful point, Nick. Some of our listeners might find that writing a journal in English actually helps them process their feelings more gently. Or listening to soft English podcasts, like this one, can feel like company during lonely hours.
We've heard from listeners who say, "English is my escape. It gives me hope. It's something I can control when everything else feels too much." And if that's you, we admire your courage. Even if you can't study every day, the fact that you're still here, still trying, is a quiet kind of bravery.
Yes. And we also want to acknowledge something important. You don't need to be positive all the time to make progress. You don't need to fix your anxiety to become fluent. You can be tired and still learn. You can cry and still show up. You can pause for a month and still return stronger.
It's okay to rest. It's okay to take breaks. In fact, it's necessary. Because real learning, The kind that stays with you, happens when your nervous system feels safe. So if studying English while anxious feels impossible today, that's not failure. That's a sign to be gentler with yourself.
So maybe today, instead of doing exercises or grammar drills, just listen. Maybe you listen to a short story in English, or you rewatch your favorite film with subtitles. Maybe you sing along to a song you love, even if your voice shakes. That still counts as learning. That still counts as growth.
And if all you do is listen to this podcast today, let that be enough. You are enough.
You are.
There is no finish line you need to race toward. There is no timeline you must follow. Your English journey is uniquely yours. And so is your healing.
So to everyone learning English while living with depression or anxiety, thank you. We hope you feel seen. We hope you feel a little less alone. And we're so proud of you for being here.
We really are.
Something I've learned, both from personal experience and from speaking with learners around the world, is that emotions are deeply tied to memory. When you're feeling safe, calm, or even mildly content, your brain is more open to storing and recalling new words. But when you're anxious or depressed, it's like trying to learn with fog over your thoughts.
Yes, and that's not your fault. It's biology. Anxiety can make it hard to focus. Depression can slow down your thinking, even your speech. You might read a sentence 5 times and still not remember what it says. But again, that doesn't mean you're failing. It means your brain is asking for care, not criticism.
That's such an important distinction. And you know, sometimes, when words feel heavy, it's okay to go visual. Watching short videos, using flashcards with images, or just looking at something beautiful in English, a poem, a scene from a series, can still keep the language alive inside you.
Absolutely. I once spoke with a student who said, when I couldn't speak, I just read subtitles. I didn't study. I just existed with English until it felt safe again. And I found that deeply moving. Because language isn't only something you speak. It's also something you feel.
Yes. And sometimes, when the world feels too loud, English can become a small, quiet space just for you. A place where you can retreat and rest, not just perform.
You don't need to impress anyone. You don't have to be fluent by a certain age, or pass a test right now. It's okay if you forget words. It's okay if you speak slowly. Every sentence you say, even with pauses, even with mistakes, is still a sentence you built. That's a triumph.
And if no one has told you today, you are doing well. Not because you studied for 2 hours. But because you kept going, even when your energy was low, even when your heart felt heavy.
Let's talk about routines. When you're anxious or depressed, it's hard to stick to strict study schedules. But instead of setting rigid goals like, study 1 hour every day, try creating tiny, flexible rituals. Maybe you listen to 5 minutes of English audio while brushing your teeth. Or you learn one new word every evening, like a whisper of progress.
I love that, a whisper of progress. That's powerful. Because healing doesn't shout. And neither does quiet resilience. Sometimes, the strongest learners are the ones who keep trying in silence, without applause.
And speaking of silence, don't be afraid to sit in it. You don't always need to be productive. If all you do today is rest, breathe, and feel your feelings, that is still progress. Your mental wellness is part of your learning path, not separate from it.
We've also heard from many listeners who've said that learning English gave them a way to name what they were feeling. That sometimes, their native language didn't have words for their emotions, but English helped them understand and express things they didn't know how to say before.
That's something I've found too. Words like burnout, overthinking, numbness, grief, these aren't just vocabulary. They are mirrors. They let us describe our inner world more clearly. And that, in itself, can be healing.
Language is power. And even in the darkest seasons, having just one word to hold onto can be a lifeline. If today you learn the word gentle and use it to describe how you want to treat yourself, that's enough. That word can stay with you.
Or the word still. As in, I am still here. I am still trying. I am still learning. Even if it's slow. Even if it hurts. Even if it's just one step a week.
And let's not forget, community matters. Sometimes, speaking with another learner, or just listening to a voice that understands you, can lift that heavy feeling for a little while. That's part of why we're here, not to teach like robots, but to talk like real people, because we are.
That's right. And we've had difficult days too. Days when nothing made sense. Days when we couldn't even get through a paragraph. So if you're in that place now, please know, you're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not bad at English. You're simply walking through a tough chapter.
And chapters change. Emotions shift. What feels impossible today might feel doable tomorrow, or the next week, or the next month. There is no rush.
There really isn't. And even if no one else sees how hard you're trying, we do. Every time you listen, every time you whisper a new word to yourself in the dark, you're rewriting your story with hope.
So breathe. Go slow. Be soft with yourself. English will still be here when you're ready. And on the days when you are ready, even just a little, we'll be right here too.
There's something else we often forget to mention when talking about language learning and mental health, and that's patience. Not just with the language, but with yourself. Depression and anxiety can make time feel distorted. You might feel like you're standing still while the world races ahead.
Yes, or like you're walking through mud while others are sprinting. But language learning is not a race. And especially when you're healing emotionally, progress can't be measured by speed. It's more like watering a plant in the shade. You may not see changes right away, but deep growth is still happening.
That's a beautiful image. And it's true, some of the most meaningful progress happens invisibly. When you choose to try again after a bad day. When you let go of guilt for missing a lesson. When you tell yourself, I deserve to learn at my own pace. That's transformation.
And let's talk about expectations, especially the unrealistic ones we place on ourselves. Depression often comes with a voice in your head saying, you should be doing more. You're behind. You're wasting time. But healing means learning to answer that voice with kindness.
You can say, I hear you. But I'm doing what I can today, and that's enough. Because pushing yourself beyond your emotional capacity doesn't lead to better results, it just deepens burnout. And language is something you're meant to grow with, not suffer through.
That's right. And another gentle strategy for days when you're feeling low is to make your English learning more sensory. Turn on some calming instrumental music. Light a candle. Watch an English video with soft visuals. Let English come into your environment gently, like background sunlight.
Yes. Surround yourself with the language in a way that doesn't demand anything from you. Let it just be there, no pressure, no goals. Maybe your brain absorbs something. Maybe it doesn't. But either way, you're allowing English to live in your world. That's enough.
And remember, even silent exposure matters. Listening to English podcasts, reading subtitles, seeing words on packaging or signs, it all adds up over time. Learning doesn't have to be loud or intense. Sometimes it's a quiet echo that slowly becomes a voice.
And I think it's worth reminding our listeners that you don't have to talk all the time to be learning. Depression often makes speaking hard. So if you're not ready to speak English out loud, it's okay. Focus on listening. Focus on reading. Your voice will return when it's ready.
And when it does, it might shake a little. You might forget words. You might pause often. But that's okay. That's not failure, That's your first steps back into light. And every learner stumbles at the beginning. Even native speakers forget words sometimes.
Yes. I've had days when even I blank out in the middle of a sentence. It doesn't mean I'm not fluent, it means I'm human. So don't judge yourself for having slow days. In fact, treat those days like you would a child learning to walk, with tenderness.
And if the only English sentence you say today is "I'm tired," or "I'm trying," let that be your practice. Because those are real, honest sentences. You're using the language to express your truth. And that, more than anything, is what English is for.
You know, sometimes I think the most powerful thing a learner can say isn't something complex like, "I'd like to inquire about the schedule," but something simple and raw, like, "I feel sad," or "I don't know what to do." That's where real connection begins.
And language is about connection more than perfection. So even if your grammar isn't perfect, or your accent isn't clear, if your heart is in your words, you're already communicating something meaningful.
Exactly. So today, if you're feeling empty or overwhelmed, let this be your reminder: you are not falling behind. You are walking your path slowly. And every step, no matter how small, is sacred.
And if you ever need to pause, to rest, to cry, to breathe, do it. Learning can wait. Healing is part of learning. In fact, the two are often woven together in ways we don't even realize.
So as you move through your day, ask yourself gently, not "How much can I study?" but "How can I be kind to myself while learning?" Because that question, more than any textbook, might be the key to lifelong progress.
And whether you study for 1 minute or not at all today, just know, you're already enough. And every effort you make, even the invisible ones, even the ones that happen inside your heart, that's English, too.
You know, sometimes I think the bravest English learners aren't the ones who score the highest or speak the fastest. It's the ones who show up even when their energy is gone. The ones who sit in silence, press play on a podcast, and just let the words wash over them like waves.
That's so true. Just listening, even without understanding every word, is an act of hope. Because depression tries to convince us that nothing will ever change. But listening is like whispering back, maybe something will.
Exactly. And I'd also say this: your English learning doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You don't have to study like influencers on social media, or follow the same routines as people with different lives and mental states. You get to design your own path.
And that path can change from day to day. On some days, maybe you write a full page in your English journal. On others, maybe you can't even open the notebook. Both of those days are valid. Both are part of your journey.
And on the hardest days, it can be helpful to return to your why. Why do you want to learn English? Not for anyone else. Not for a grade or an exam. But for you. Maybe it's because you want to understand your favorite music. Or speak to someone you love. Or tell your story more freely.
Yes, your why is like a light in the fog. It doesn't have to be big or dramatic. Even something as simple as, "I want to feel a little more confident," is a powerful reason. And when your motivation feels low, come back to that light. Remind yourself what this language means to you.
And you know, when we're struggling mentally, we often feel disconnected from our own voice. Language learning can be a way to rebuild that connection. To remind yourself, I still have something to say. I still have a voice worth hearing.
And even if no one hears you right away, even if you only speak to yourself in your room, those words still matter. You're creating a space where your feelings can live. You're telling yourself, my experience has meaning, in any language.
And that's something English can give you. A new way to tell your truth. A new set of words to describe what hurts, what helps, and what you hope for. Even if you only learned 5 words this week, if those 5 words are honest, they are powerful.
I also want to mention how helpful it can be to create emotional anchors in your English practice. For example, have a favorite quote or sentence that comforts you. Maybe it's from a book, a movie, or a podcast. Something simple like, "This too shall pass," or "You are not alone."
That's a great idea. Those small phrases can become like lifeboats. You repeat them when the storm is loud. And every time you say them, they become more real. You're not just learning English, you're building inner strength, word by word.
And you don't have to be fluent to use that strength. One kind word in English, like breathe, or kindness, or peace, can carry so much healing. Sometimes, one word is enough.
And if your brain is too tired for new words, go back to old ones. Review something familiar. Rewatch a scene you love. Let English become a space of repetition and comfort, not stress and pressure.
Yes. We often talk about learning like it's a staircase, but sometimes it's more like a circle. You return to the same lessons again and again, but each time, you're seeing them with different eyes. With more experience. With deeper understanding.
And even if you feel stuck in that circle, please remember, you're not in the same place. You're healing, you're growing, you're surviving. That matters. And the fact that you're here, listening, tells me you haven't given up. And that is extraordinary.
It really is. And something else I often say to my students is, you don't need permission to rest. Rest is part of learning. Rest is part of strength. And when you rest, you're not quitting, you're preparing for your next gentle step forward.
That's a message many of us need to hear again and again. Because we live in a world that often tells us we have to be constantly achieving. But your value is not in your productivity. Your value is in your being. In your presence. In your quiet effort to keep going.
So even if all you do today is listen to these words, that's already enough. And if you forget everything tomorrow and need to listen again, that's okay too. Learning isn't linear. Healing isn't linear. Life isn't linear. And that's okay.
We're all just figuring it out, step by step. Breath by breath. And along the way, if English can be one small light in your dark days, we're grateful to be part of that light with you.
If you're listening right now and you're feeling overwhelmed, please remember, you don't have to do everything today. You don't have to be perfect. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to go slowly. Learning English is not a race, and neither is healing.
Exactly. We're proud of you for showing up, for choosing to listen, even on a difficult day. That choice means something. You're not alone in this, even if it feels like it sometimes. There's a whole community of learners and people who care about you, right here.
So take a deep breath. Speak gently to yourself. And whatever your English journey looks like, whatever your mental health journey looks like, know that both are valid. Both deserve kindness.
Thank you for spending this time with us. From our hearts to yours, keep going, at your own pace, in your own way. You're doing better than you think.
And as always, we're here with you, every step of the way. This has been the British Accent Podcast. Until next time, take care of your mind, your heart, and your words.